Our planet is now in the midst of its 6th mass extinction of plants and animals because of humanity's spread around the planet, destroying and paving over so much ground that once sustained abundant Earth life. The gray non-human explained to Linda Porter that it was vital that her soul entity continue in the body container that she had been born with in order to accomplish an unknown alien agenda. Linda said she was shown a soul transfer process on a man dying on a table in front of her while a gray being stood closely by monitoring. Linda Porter, in my book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, was the first of half a dozen people in the human abduction syndrome that I interviewed who had experienced being raised and lowered in a tube of light and passing through walls that, quote, felt like thousands of little feathers all over my body, close quote. Linda said the light tube is different from the tunnels that opened up right inside of her bedroom. Quote, the beam is used only to transfer people from Earth to a craft and back, which is this illustration. The tunnel is a physical created hole from one dimension to another. Traveling through the tunnel was what made me ill. It had something to do with change in physical density of two differing dimensions, close quote. Linda told me that in 1963, when she was 17 years old, she was abducted from her Covina, California home by gray-colored beings with large eyes. Now, as far as I know and she knows, these are the gray types that are supposed to have pear-shaped heads as opposed to these heads like this on the cover of Whitley Strieber's book. That is a gray. This is an Eben. The gray beings seem to be in the category of extraterrestrial biological entities, or Ebens, that are described in leaked documents from our government as friendly and concerned about Earth and human evolution. And the only caveat I will say is that there is really no clarity about agendas that I know, even from people that I have talked to in the last 5 years who have whistleblower knowledge. They seem to be as confused about types and agendas as all the rest of us, but at least we need to struggle with trying to understand, do we have an ally and do we have an enemy? Linda Porter was shown a procedure to transfer the soul or life force from a dying man into a totally healthy clone by a gray being as a demonstration before the same procedure was done with Linda because she had rheumatic fever as a teenager that damaged her heart. The gray non-human explained to Linda Porter that it was vital that her soul entity continue in the body container that she had been born with in order to accomplish an unknown alien agenda. Linda said she was shown a soul transfer process on a man dying on a table in front of her while a gray being stood closely by monitoring. And then Linda saw rise out of the top of the dead man's spine, right where the neck and the back spine joined together. And it was a golden yellow-orange light that elongated as it moved into the air, and she estimated it became about 3 to 4 feet long as it moved across this room to a row of body-sized tubes lighted from top and bottom and filled with a strange purple-looking gas. Inside the tube on the far right was a clone body of the same man, but about 10 years younger. Linda Porter said there was a problem about Earth body containers, souls, other dimensions, and altered timelines. Over and over again in the abductees that I've interviewed the last 36 years, it constantly comes up as a theme. Something is wrong in the timelines, that Earth is caught in a cycle of catastrophe, that the Ebens want to change this cycle in and out of catastrophe, but that they stress you can make impact on lines this way. You can add timelines purposely to try to redirect a timeline, is the way it's described to abductees. But you can only do so much manipulation on timelines, and then they go, and that's what it's called, a snap. A snap in timelines that have been manipulated from out or in. And the suggestion is that you can only manipulate timelines so far, so long before that happens. Then the catastrophic situation is much greater than anything that they have been trying to avert. And so everything that I've learned up to this point in this day in February is it is possible to go forwards and backwards in time. It is possible to manipulate time. We're dealing with non-humans who do it all the time. They will put enemies in a timeline to preserve them. They will move asteroids if they are so inclined. There's a lot that is done with manipulating time that we humans caught in this ticking second by second that we live in XYZ. We cannot comprehend this as a living reality of the non-humans dealing with it, with us. But I do know for a fact that our government has been working on trying to manipulate time since at least the 1950s. And Bob Lazar told me that when he was at Area 51, they took him in, and he was, and people who say he wasn't, including Stanton Friedman, who is a friend and I respect very much, but I totally disagree with Stanton Friedman, that Bob Lazar was the real deal. He was exposed to real craft underground at Area 51. And Bob told me himself that one of the most fascinating things that the EG&G technologists who took him into Area 51 showed him was a room. And they said, we want you to see how we are learning how to control time. And this goes back to 1988. And they put a candle on a table and they lighted it with a match. They took a device, extraterrestrial, and aimed it at the candle. The flame went from flicker to a flame that did not move. There was no melting, but the fire was suspended. Try to begin to wrap your mind around that. The fire doesn't go away. The fire is like in a suspended animation as a flame. And his explaining that to me helps me to think about what we're dealing with now of non-humans that are taking abductees and saying there's something vital about keeping the soul entity in container bodies for a certain period of time in order to accomplish whatever this huge picture is, in which they are also trying to break a mistake, correct a mistake, in which this Earth and our solar system is caught up in a cycle of catastrophe. Linda Porter, I was told that the resurrected cloned man would be relocated elsewhere, maybe Australia, and would continue on with his life. And the idea is that this has been happening all over the planet. People will die, he would have had a funeral, the family will have mourned him, but that the actual essence of the mind-body consciousness will be living a life in Singapore or Australia or someplace where the non-humans assume that it will be unlikely for anyone who was in Michigan who knew this man to cross paths with him in Australia. How much of this goes on? It could explain what John Mack, Bud Hopkins, and I once had a long discussion that back in the early 1980s, one of the phenomena that would just seem to be coming from every direction in the abductions was the doppelganger. People were being shown a mirror image of themselves. And these are all like pieces of pages in an evolving chapter, as if we're being conditioned to this concept that there is some sort of a cloning android multiplication going on this planet, whether we're aware or not. Linda thought that it was vital to the non-human entities that the man's soul continue functioning longer inside the same kind of container that his older sick body had been. Part of the reason that they take tissue samples from abductees when they are quite young is to have this tissue in reserve in case a new body for an abductee becomes necessary later on. Quote, "New bodies can be stored indefinitely. The containers in the sketch with the 3 people in the tubes are storage containers. The containers in both new sketches that I sent you are activation containers. They have a light in the top that must be on the person for an unknown amount of hours before a body can be activated if a body has been in storage. If the body is newly made, it does not need light. In the sketch with the 3 people in the tubes, the body on the far right was the younger one given to the dying man. I got the impression the aliens do not like to do this soul transfer very often. Actually, I got the feeling the aliens are not supposed to be doing this at all. But they seem to be backed into a corner and have no other recourse. They also seem to be trying to hide all of this from some higher form of life. Whatever the authority is that prohibits this soul transfer also prohibits them from interfering on this planet. But the very act of the abductions is interference on this planet. It's contradictions everywhere. Whoever it is much higher evolved than they are and wields a great deal of power over many, many other realms of existence. Linda said, there is much, much more to existence than we could ever begin to understand. Much of what we have been taught regarding the physical universe and the laws that govern it is wrong. This creature's civilization communicates difficult concepts via the use of symbols that radiate emotion. They use this form to get concepts across with their exact true meanings intact. No misinterpretations can occur this way. The symbols are not mathematical, but appear as 3-dimensional holographic pictures that resemble abstract sculptures. The emotional aspect is relayed via carrier waves that resemble sound waves, but are not part of the human sound spectrum. These waves can be felt, but not heard. If the creatures want to clear a certain area of humans, they can broadcast this carrier wave over the area at a certain frequency, and it will create intense fear in people, causing them to flee the area. It does not cause harm, so they say, and here last night was my last real paragraph when I was explaining that John Keel, sitting next to me in an airplane coming back from a conference a few years before he died, he told me about he was walking on a path when he was working on the Mothman prophecies, and he was in Virginia. It was a sunny day. Everything was normal. He was just walking. And he remembered that his right foot and leg had gone forward, and suddenly he was drenched in terror, fear. His body began trembling. He was so shocked. It was the shock of what happened to his body that made him back up. When he backed up, it all went away. Everything was totally peaceful. And then he said, this has to be the ETs and technology. And he stepped forward with his right foot. Overwhelming fear. Step back out. Everything normal. He said he did it a dozen times, and that is the zone of fear that he wrote about in his book. He was convinced it was technological frequencies, that we are dealing with non-humans who understand our brain and body system extremely well because they made us, and that they are able to generate focused or wide beam frequencies that can stop us in our tracks, terrify us, or cause any other kind of an emotional spectrum. The Eben doing the soul transfer from Linda Porter's diseased body to her new clone body in one of those lighted tubes gave Linda Porter an overview of how the cosmos is constructed from the Eben and the praying mantis working with the Eben point of view. The universe is built on sound patterns, which is why so many different worlds, dimensions can exist in the same space. Each is on a different frequency. Disrupt a world dimension to the point that you destroy the carrier wave it exists on, and you have created a hole in existence that cannot support the dimension above or below it. Each frequency, besides maintaining its own world dimension, also supports or holds in place the one above it and below it. Everything is interdependent. There are countless worlds' dimensions occupying the same space without being aware of one another because of having their own individual octaves. This octave frequency holds the world dimension in place and causes it to exist safely without interfering with or even being aware of other worlds around it. This frequency acts as a buffer zone to keep everything in its place. Do anything to disrupt it, and you begin a collapse that starts a deadly chain reaction. If the density of this collapse reaches a certain weight, space-time itself begins to collapse. Whatever the experiment is that our U.S. government is involved with in outer space, if successful, it will change the density of matter to such an extent that the chain reaction started will not be able to be stopped by anybody in any world dimension. She does not know what that experimentation was. That was what the non-humans told her. There's a bell-shaped curve of warnings to people in the human abduction syndrome that even includes skyfire. Many have been shown the entire atmosphere of the Earth on fire. Is it a metaphor? Is it trying to scare? Is it like the zone of fear that John Keel talked about feeling physically? Are these tests? What are they? There are literally hundreds of different alien life forms here trying to stop what is happening as it is putting their own worlds at risk. Some, as I had mentioned in earlier letters, are not supposed to be interfering, but they are doing so anyway. What they are trying to do is to stop the ripple effect that will emanate outward from Earth should this government experiment succeed. And remember, this is an interview recorded with me that I did with her in 1992. With all their technology, Linda, why don't the aliens or their superiors just walk in and stop the whole thing themselves? Why do they need us abductees to speak for them? Something just doesn't make any sense. I wonder if we are being lied to, used for some purpose to put over ideas that the non-humans want us to believe. If there is an experiment, maybe if it succeeds, it will put us in competition with the aliens for something they do not want to share. Maybe the aliens are trying to scare us out of their neighborhood. A similar warning about a government experiment in space was described by another woman in the abduction syndrome named Judy Doherty. I met Judy when I was producing the TV documentary A Strange Harvest about the worldwide animal mutilation phenomenon. Law enforcement told me as far back as September 1979 that they knew, quote, the perpetrators are creatures from outer space, close quote, because of the bloodless surgical excisions on both the surface of animals and the removal of internal organs such as hearts and trachea without any surgical excisions on the surface of the animal's body. The first time that someone tried to put the baffling pieces of puzzles of what I call an alien taxonomy together for me in a kind of more coherent picture was a Washington, D.C. military source who claimed firsthand interaction with at least one type of non-human. He agreed to talk with me off the record about the type that he knew as extraterrestrial biological entities that he called Ebens. My source told me that this drawing was almost like a photograph of an Eben. He stressed that the Ebens have pear-shaped heads, not triangular heads like some smaller gray androids. The Ebens are allegedly from a desert planet orbiting the binary suns Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2, about 39 light years from Earth. The Ebens' planet skies are described as bright to dim, but never dark. This pastel drawing was done by a Colorado male abductee who was lifted up with his wife in their car by a cerulean blue beam of bright light in late November 1985 from a highway near Longmont, Colorado. The whole case, with many photos and illustrations, is in my first book, An Alien Harvest. My source told me the Ebens are supposed to be friendly and not do abductions. But he had to admit to me that if the illustration by the husband was, quote, almost like a photograph of an Eben, close quote, then it meant the Ebens abducted the husband and his wife while they were driving in their car that suddenly was picked up by a blue-green beam of light emitted from a round craft. My Washington source knew about my home box office TV project that took me to Kirtland Air Force Base on April 9, 1983, where I was shown an alleged briefing paper for an unnamed U.S. president that said, quote, these extraterrestrial biological entities, known by the acronym Ebens, manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien, close quote. My Washington source told me that was true, but he stressed that no one in the American government with access to that knowledge ever wanted to be alive if or when such an announcement were broadcast to the world that humans are someone else's experimental androids, an ET human hybrid project. He told me that he had talked firsthand with a U.S. Air Force captain who received telepathic communication from one non-human at a crash site in the Roswell region in 1949, not 47. And because the captain, more than anyone else at the crash site, could clearly and apparently correctly receive mind-to-mind communication from the non-human that they came to call an Eben, the captain was assigned to live with this entity called EBA-1 at the Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico until EBA-1 died of unknown causes on June 18, 1952. That Air Force captain said one of the most important telepathic transmissions that he ever received from EBA-1 was, quote, we made you, we put you here, but you have to live it. Close quote. My Washington source tried to explain what he thought the Eben meant. Quote, Linda, the key to everything is ET creation of human ET hybrid body containers in which ET life force or ET souls can be placed to perpetuate one of the alien civilizations that is facing physical extinction because it can no longer reproduce, close quote. This would explain why the light tube resurrection technology overseen by the praying mantis and the Ebens in the Linda Porter, California abduction case stressed the need to keep the soul in human body containers for specific lengths of time. But it does not explain why humans must be used to make the vital hybrid body containers to perpetuate alien souls. This is my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, that was first released in 1998. And not long after the publication, one night in Philadelphia where I was living, I answered a phone call. There was a deep male, unidentified voice on the other end who simply started talking and said, quote, I thought you should know that your new book has stirred up a hornet's nest at MJ-12 in Washington. Congratulations. And then the deep voice hung up. There is a lot in my book, Glimpses Volume 2. If I only could show everybody what is behind all of those pages, you'd probably drop to the floor. But Glimpses Volume 2 is so important because I know the sources of the information, and the problem that all of us have is we can't prove. The people who are whistleblowing do not have, in most cases, the documents, the photographs, the videotapes, the autopsy reports, the medical people. They can't hand them over. But I think that the whistleblowers need to be listened to. And since the early 1980s, after the TV broadcast of my documentary special, A Strange Harvest, I have received some insights from two different government agency men willing to hear my questions about the alien presence on Earth and why that alien presence seems so focused on genetic harvest from humans and animals. One man was retired in Washington, D.C. The other continued assignments in the Southwest. Both said they had done work for the highly secret MJ-12 group, and both of these interviews were done in the mid-1980s, recorded, and I combined them into one name, Sherman, in my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities. Interesting to me is that they both emphasized that there was a difference between the gray-skinned Eben types with the pear-shaped heads and the smaller, thinner grays with triangular faces. The Eben here is on the left and a gray is on the right. The men thought that the Ebens were our allies, but they did not at all trust the smaller grays with the pointed chins. Adding to the physical appearance confusion were biological androids made by the Ebens and the other aliens that ranged widely in appearance, from insects to humanoids designed by their makers for various planetary tasks in this and other solar systems. For those of you who were at my presentation in Big Bear, if anybody was, 3 weeks ago, I am doing now a taxonomy that I really think is beginning to penetrate some of the interstitial layers. And there is a section in that presentation where I am showing that the Eben type here on a list of various types of androids now interacting with this planet have made, with rapid cycle cloning, the tube technology I showed you, at least two more of what the government would say are two more species of alien presence on the Earth. That would mean at least 3 of 5 that they discuss. One is prime, the other 2 are made by the prime. The 4th is not known, the 5th may be quite different. But just begin to wrap your mind around the fact that we may be seeing tremendous numbers of different types, all leading back to maybe only 1, 2, or 3 prime extraterrestrial civilizations. And they don't. The civilizations do not get along. Both men have periodically given me information over the years, which I have no way to prove, but I offer now in the context of other military and intelligent voices. And I call them Sherman. And these excerpts begin on page 128 of my third book, Glimpses, Volume 2. Sherman said it was true that MJ-12 or Majestic 12 was established by one of President Harry S. Truman's executive orders, top secret, no one's ever seen it, in 1947. MJ-12's charter, he said, was to study the UFO phenomenon, to oversee retrievals of crashed disks and alien bodies, to back-engineer extraterrestrial technology, and to study captured beings referred to as extraterrestrial biological entities or Ebens. MJ-12, he said, was also directed to keep the public and the media ignorant of the extraterrestrial presence at all costs, to prevent public panic and to keep the aliens' advanced technologies hidden from Cold War enemies in the interests of national security. Sherman said in the 1990s, MJ-12 had changed to a different letter number code that began E2. I asked Sherman if he had personally seen non-human technology, and he said that he had held an Eben device called the Yellow Book, in which symbols glow yellow and three-dimensional images rise up like the Princess Leia hologram in Star Wars. Bob Lazar, back in 1990, 2 days that I spent in Las Vegas talking with Bob about everything and in huge depth, told me that one of the books that he had been allowed to pick up at McLaren Airport on his way to Area 51 with this EG&G Navy work that he did for a while, he said, The one book, it would say Sol, S-O-L, 1, 2, 3, Roman numerals. And you would open it up the way we would open up a book. And there would be pages and pages of humans and the earth and animals. And as you would lift up each page, an animal would come up 3D, a house would come up 3D, and you could move the page. And as you moved the page very, very delicately, you could make the whole house or building go down to the frame, down to where they dug. It would actually show the excavation in soil. They would do the same thing with bodies. The bodies would go down to the marrow and come up skeletally and muscle and up to beings, and that all sorts of facets of the earth were in these three-dimensional holograms that you could keep going up and in and out and explore. Then you take, as he said, so we have our left hand with a spine to the left. You take the book, you turn it upside down, and you put the spine in your right hand. And now you're opening it this way. And now, as you look at it, it says reticulin 1V, 4. Reticulin 4. Then when you move the pages, everything going this way is from Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2. Allegedly, the Ebens, seeing their bodies, their homes, everything in the same three-dimensional as the humans, all in one book. And I remember Lazar saying, it is so impossible to understand. Linda, he said, I would go like this, I'd get down like this, and you could make the hologram move like this. He said, what the hell is projecting? How does this work? That is really something, and that is what this yellow book is like as well.
Just a quick question. Was this more like a directory?
No.
An encyclopedia?
No. He said this would be like a history of 2 planets in one, what we would call a book, but you accessed one planet this way, you accessed the other planet by turning it this way.
So,
But all of it was holographic projections as you moved the pages, not text.
but the 2 worlds are linked then?
Yes.
Somehow deeply.
I wish I knew. I'm just telling you, and I think Bob Lazar, of all the people in the planet that I have ever met, who is the least. He is so rebellious. He is such a. He's never going to lie because it would somehow violate some internal code. That's Lazar, all of us who have known him. He's not a liar. He's not a bullshitter. He's always told the truth. And I think you can take to the bank that what he described in this minute detail of this extraordinary technology is real. And it fits into what Sherman told me, which is completely independent from Lazar, about the yellow book and the holographic pages. So Sherman said that those 3-dimensional images in the yellow book come from the Ebens ability, and here is another thing to emphasize in your mind, these words. This is a direct quote. They come from the Ebens ability to, quote, capture time and play it back. That the first time I heard that, I said, well, what's the difference between that and film, video, television? Well, what is the difference? And he said, Linda, I know we've all asked the same question. And he said, what we're told is that when we are looking at the Eben technology of scenes on this earth, their planet, other places in the solar system, that we are literally, they know how, I have a language problem. Is it dipping into the time stream from another dimension and literally duplicating like in a computer that time stream and putting it into one of these machines so that it is not a recreation. It's not even a photograph. It is actually time, capturing time and playing it back. There is something about those words, I have been told, that are extremely important to everything that's happening, capturing time and playing it back. And remember, I started talking about that there appears to be a big problem with time. And we are in an Earth and a solar system in which there's been some sort of a manipulation in time that has caused a problem. The Ebens may truly be trying to correct something. It may have to do with the recycling of souls, literally, from the matter worlds into another dimension. It's that big. Sherman said he had been told that the Ebens experimented genetically in Bhutan, Tibet, and Nepal, and then transplanted some of those altered human ET hybrids to what we call Central America. Specifically, the Mayans were an Eben genetic experiment. I ask, then Sherman, is it true that the Ebens and maybe other extraterrestrial groups manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien, as I was shown in that briefing paper at Kirtland on April 9th, 1983? And Sherman said, yes, but it's a difficult subject. All I can tell you is something EBA 1 said, and that's the famous, we made you, we put you here, but you have to live it, and they watch us grow. Sherman, they've been here since at least the time of the dinosaurs. I've been told by a man who retired from the DIA that our government has proof that 5 competing extraterrestrial biological civilizations have been terraforming and harvesting genetic material from Earth for 270 million years. Dinosaurs didn't exist before 35 to 40 million years. And the dinosaurs lasted for 85 million years. And he said, according to a report I read, the Ebens collected one of each species of dinosaur and placed them either on one big planetary zoo or on different planets. And that was at least 68 million or more years ago, not far off from this other timeline the DIA guy gave me. And I guess that they have experimented with life forms here on Earth ever since. I said, what about the animal mutilations? And Sherman said, the animal mutilations did occur and were performed by the aliens. We allowed them to conduct experiments using animals, not just cattle. I don't know if you are aware or not, but there were a lot of moose and caribou found mysteriously dead in the Arctic and the Alaskan. We think it was part of the Eben experimentation, but we could not figure out what had happened. The Ebens wanted to conduct experiments, better animals than humans, to complicate matters in order to cover up the animal mutilations. Our government launched a military program to test certain biological drugs on animals. This was to cover up the alien mutilation program. I asked, do the Ebens excise tissues from animals? And he said, after we had more communications with the Ebens, they explained to us, quote, you have to understand that for an advanced civilization, you have robots and androids to do these things. And we began to understand that the Eben androids could be anything. The androids can be configured any way the Ebens want for whatever mission the Ebens want carried out. The Ebens are controlling a big part of an operation concerning Earth, and we cannot control everything they do. But I can tell you the Ebens are big environmentalists, huge. They would make the Sierra Club look like brownie scouts. They were so worried about our nuclear tests and nuclear materials being exploded and contaminating not only the Earth, but the universe in general, close quote. Sherman, do you mean that our atomic bombs impacted other life forms or even other dimensions? Right. So that's one of the things the Ebens are very vocal about. They wanted above ground atomic tests stopped, and boy, were they stopped. From your point of view, are Ebens the only non-humans that have experimented genetically on this planet? All I know is that the Ebens started an experiment, but they couldn't keep out other space travelers. Word got out that this planet was a strange place to visit, and that different experiments were not going the way the Ebens wanted. Part of the Ebens problems might be because there are bad guys doing experiments too that might harm us. That really confuses matters when it comes to telling who wants to help humans and who does not. In abduction reports, people describe creatures that look like praying mantis insects. What are those? As far as I've heard, they could be very advanced androids which can oversee long-term projects that last for thousands of years, but I'm not certain who they work with or for. What is the relationship between the Greys and the Ebens? They were enemies at one time. They are supposed to live without war today, but the Ebens have no control over the Greys. The Greys do their thing and the Ebens do theirs. Is there a pecking order among the alien types? To the best of our knowledge, there is no cooperation. No cooperation exists between the different alien groups. And I think there was a war about 6,000 years ago between the Ebens and the Blondes over territorial rights to a planet somewhere. I don't know if it was out at Zeta Reticuli or around here or what. So both groups, the Ebens and the blonde humanoids, make android creatures to do work for them on different planets. That's what I understand. Androids come in many different types. Insect, humanoid MIBs, the men in black, and others, all have an advanced implanted brain that can operate on its own or by remote control. Ironically, we think some of these genetically engineered creatures have a higher intelligence than their creators. The androids can be reptilian. Both groups, the Ebens and the blonde humanoids, can make robots or androids that can be anything they want them to be. Both groups know how to mix and match genomes and DNA easily, and remember, the aliens are millions of years advanced beyond us. And the Ebens genetic experimentation in Tibet, does that connect somehow to the Dalai Lama? I'm thinking about reincarnation through different beings in different cycles of life. Would that concept relate to an Eben supposedly telling an Air Force captain in 1949 that recycling of souls is the machinery of the universe? Sherman, exactly. There are only so many souls that just continuously recycle. Through life form bodies that are containers? Right, exactly. And if there are more container bodies than souls, what happens? I don't know, but souls are interconnected in some way. I think they told us that because the Ebens have been around so long, they have learned that there are only so many souls in this universe which must be recycled. If there is a finite number of souls in the universe, and the Ebens know that, and yet we are living on a planet in which there is an exponential increase in the number of bodies, does that imply that not all bodies can have souls? Sherman, I guess you have a point there. And if not all body containers have souls, would the Ebens and blonde humanoids have some stake invested in souls, like souls could be the coin of the realm, so to speak? That's possible, I guess. I never thought of it that way before. Some abductee researchers, such as Dr. Leo Sprinkle, a Wyoming psychologist, and Harvard University psychiatrist Dr. John Mack, have stumbled onto what appears to be a continuity of the same Ebens, or maybe the Greys, present from human life to human life, because the same alien being comes up in past life regressions at births and at deaths. Sherman, I don't know. All I do know is that the soul, when the body container dies, the soul contains or maintains or keeps some thoughts or something from that life that was just lived. It's said in the Yellow Book that the Ebens are concerned about human souls If our particular species continued on its course, they are afraid we would damage our container bodies, and that could damage the souls. How would our body containers damage our souls? I don't know. I realize the containers are the human bodies, and that was why they were so concerned with what we have been doing, the wars and so forth. They are afraid that the souls will be damaged by our containers. One of the MJ-12 guys who had seen more of the Yellow Book gave me an analogy. He said that when you put something in a container and you pour it out, and he was thinking of paint going into a can, there's always some residue that remains. Something remains in that soul. So when you pass the soul on in different containers, it picks up the residues of all the different containers it has been in, and a little of each remains and stays throughout. I guess there is an eternity. There is no end. I asked him, does the soul wear out after so many recycles? And he said, no, souls never wear out. The Supreme Being makes sure that that does not happen. While reviewing these pages of Glimpses of Other Realities, a research colleague and attorney, Michael Pill of Massachusetts, wrote to me, quote, "The notion of the soul picking up residues may explain why we have memories of past lives. It may also explain why, after spending thousands of years and who knows how many wretched lifetimes trying to work out the karma from one or more evil incarnations, one can still feel the enticing charm of the dark side. Those 7 deadly sins are like predators. They've got you before you realize they are there." I asked Sherman, "Is there a devil out there somewhere?" And Sherman answered, "There is an evil force. Even the Ebens talk about it. There is a supreme being, and then there is the evil one, the evil entity. The Ebens are as scared of that evil entity as we are of the devil." I ask, "Where is the devil?" And Sherman said, "I don't know, but what worries me is that if the Ebens are scared of it, I'm damn scared of it, because the Ebens can control everything. They have been around this universe and done everything, and if they believe in the same supreme being that we call God, and they say there is an evil one, then there really is a devil." I ask, would the devil be equal to an opposite of the positive God? Are there 2 gods? Sherman answered, "I don't know. You can think about that forever. There's another thing that puzzles me. The Ebens say that everything that occurs in our time span has occurred before. I guess it means we're just right in the middle of a huge big circle, and it just goes around and around again. And the way I see this is that Earth was created, and one day, 5 billion years from now, the sun is going to expand and Earth will be engulfed and destroyed, and everything goes back into a big bang, and then everything starts over again." I ask, when the Yellow Book talked about the supreme being that created the universe, did it say anything about parallel dimensions, parallel timelines, or anything else like that? Sherman said, "No, nothing. The aliens talked about the vastness of the universe, that there are life forms all over. It talks about a supreme being creating the souls and creating the containers and distributing the souls to the containers. To the Ebens, it's just basic facts." I ask Sherman, if the Ebens made us and put us here, there has to be a reason. Are we a garden growing containers for souls to be harvested for some reason? Sherman answered, "It's another good question, and all I can tell you is that one elderly man with MJ-12 told me, quote, 'You don't want to know that.' when I asked him about souls and why the Ebens made us. Then I asked Sherman, some abductees also say that the main reason for the animal mutilations and human abductions has to do with the creation of a hybrid species. But no one knows whether the hybrids are supposed to replace the current Homo sapien container model. There is a sense that whatever the non-humans are up to, it has something to do with survival, theirs and ours. Sherman said, maybe. All I know is that the Ebens are supposed to have manipulated DNA in primates long before humans were created. So there must have been a series of experiments like Neanderthal before Cro-Magnon, and Neanderthal's gone. So who knows what is on the agenda for humans? Our planet is now in the midst of its sixth mass extinction of plants and animals because of humanity's spread around the planet, destroying and paving over so much ground that once sustained abundant Earth life. We're currently experiencing the worst period of die-off since the loss of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Scientists now estimate we are losing animals, plants, and insects at 1,000 to 10,000 times the rate prior to the 20th century, with dozens of species going extinct every day. That means by the end of this 21st century, as many as 30 to 50% of all Earth species could be gone. Perhaps the non-human intelligences which watch this planet from our moon and their spacecraft can see humanity's own future hanging in balance, but will not allow humans to destroy the Earth. Perhaps that is why the aliens increase their interference at nuclear missile sites and human abductions, despite aggressive government efforts to keep everything about the alien presence a big secret. One fact is certain. No matter who made humans or why, life on Earth is not guaranteed. But if the chokehold on the truth were released, and the entire human family could know everything the governments and militaries are hiding about ETs, including their ongoing genetic manipulation and harvesting of Earth life, perhaps human tribal warfare would slow down, and the Ebens human experiment might finally end up in a peaceful Garden of Eden where even serpents would no longer be a threat.